Marcus Richardson had seen every kind of scam in downtown Seattle. The fake veterans with perfect teeth asking for gas money. The professional beggars with designer shoes hidden under torn jackets. The pickpocket teams working the tourist areas near Pike Place Market. So when the skinny kid with dirt-caked fingernails tugged at his expensive coat sleeve outside the Nordstrom flagship store, Marcus barely glanced down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The boy couldn't have been more than 12, maybe 13. His clothes hung loose on his frame like hand-me-downs from someone twice his size. A faded Superman t-shirt with holes near the collar, jeans with knees worn through to threads, and sneakers held together with duct tape. His hair was matted and unwashed, but his eyes were the color of storm clouds, sharp and intelligent despite the exhaustion written across his young face. "Mister, please," the boy whispered, his voice cracking. "I need help. My sister, she's really sick and I don't know what to do." Marcus pulled his arm away with practiced indifference. He had a board meeting in 20 minutes, a merger worth $47 million hanging in the balance. The last thing he needed was some street kid's sob story derailing his concentration. "Not today, kid. Try the mission on 3rd Street. The boy stepped back but didn't leave. "Please, sir, just listen. I'm not asking for money. I just need someone to come with me. She won't wake up, and I'm scared to leave her alone." Something in the boy's tone made Marcus pause. Not the desperation. He'd heard that 1,000 times. It was the specific fear, the kind that came from real responsibility pressing down on shoulders too young to carry it. Marcus glanced at his Rolex. 18 minutes until the meeting that could change everything for Richardson Industries. "Look, son," Marcus said, his voice softer but still firm. "I understand you're in a tough spot, but I can't just follow random people into alleys. Call 911 if someone needs medical help." The boy's face crumpled slightly. "They won't come. Last time they said we weren't a priority because we don't have an address. The shelter's full, and the free clinic closed an hour ago." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I think she might be dying." Marcus felt something twist in his chest, an uncomfortable recognition he couldn't quite place. The way the boy held himself, protective and terrified at the same time. The adult worry etched in a child's features. "How old is your sister?" 8. Her name's Emma. She's all I got left." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. All I got left. He remembered saying those exact words 32 years ago, standing in a social worker's office, clutching his little sister's hand while strangers decided their fate. Before everything went wrong. Before he learned that sometimes trying to hold on to people only made losing them hurt worse. He shook his head, forcing the memory away. "I'm sorry, but I really can't. There are proper channels for this kind of thing." The boy nodded slowly, resignation replacing hope in his expression. "Okay. I understand. Rich people got important stuff to do." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "But, mister? If you change your mind, we're in the alley behind Chen's Market on Pine Street. The one with the blue dumpster. Emma, she's got this stuffed elephant, all gray and raggedy. She calls him Peanuts. If you see her, you'll know she's the one who needs help." Marcus watched the boy disappear into the crowd of afternoon shoppers, his small frame swallowed by the urban bustle. The image of a sick 8-year-old girl clutching a stuffed elephant lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. He checked his watch again. 15 minutes. The boardroom on the 43rd floor of the Columbia Center offered a commanding view of Elliott Bay. Marcus sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, surrounded by lawyers, accountants, and executives whose combined annual salaries could fund a small country. The merger documents lay spread before him like a roadmap to an even more profitable future. The Yamamoto Group is offering 15% above market value, his chief financial officer, Patricia Hayes, was saying. "It's an exceptional deal, Marcus. This acquisition would make Richardson Industries the third-largest shipping conglomerate on the West Coast. Marcus nodded automatically, making the appropriate responses at the right moments. But his mind kept drifting to storm-cloud eyes and a boy's voice saying, "She's all I got left." He found himself staring out the window toward the general direction of Pine Street, wondering if anyone had found the sick girl yet. "Marcus?" Patricia's voice cut through his distraction. "Mr. Yamamoto is asking about the timeline for due diligence." 6 weeks should be sufficient, Marcus replied, refocusing on the room full of expectant faces. "We'll need to review their Pacific route contracts and verify their fleet insurance policies." The meeting continued for another hour, but Marcus's concentration remained fractured. Every few minutes, his thoughts returned to the boy. Something about the kid's story felt different from the usual street corner appeals. Maybe it was the specificity of details, the way he'd mentioned the stuffed elephant's name without being asked. Or maybe it was the resignation in his voice when Marcus had turned him away, as if rejection was exactly what he'd expected. By the time the meeting ended and hands were shaken, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across downtown Seattle. Marcus found himself walking toward Pine Street instead of returning to his penthouse office. He told himself he was just curious, that he wanted to put the nagging feeling to rest so he could focus on more important matters. Chen's Market sat wedged between a pawn shop and a dry cleaner, its faded awning advertising fresh produce daily in English and Mandarin. The alley behind it was narrow and dim, barely wide enough for a delivery truck. Marcus hesitated at the entrance, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in his $2,000 suit and Italian leather shoes. The blue dumpster was exactly where the boy had said it would be. Next to it, partially hidden behind a stack of cardboard boxes, Marcus saw them. The boy was sitting cross-legged on a piece of cardboard holding a small girl against his chest. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her skin had a grayish pallor that made Marcus's chest tighten with alarm. In her limp arms was indeed a gray stuffed elephant, worn and dirty but clearly beloved. The boy looked up when Marcus's shadow fell across them. No surprise registered on his face, just a weary kind of relief. "You came back." "What's wrong with her?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside them despite the damage it would do to his expensive pants. "I don't know exactly. She's been getting sicker for weeks. Started with a cough, then she couldn't keep food down. Yesterday she was talking funny, like confused. This morning she wouldn't wake up all the way." The boy's voice was steady, but his hands shook as he smoothed his sister's tangled hair. "I think it might be the water we've been drinking, from the fountain in the park. Sometimes it tastes weird." Marcus pulled out his phone. "We need to get her to a hospital, now. They'll want insurance cards and addresses and all that stuff we don't have," the boy said quietly. "Last time, they made us wait 8 hours in the emergency room, and then gave her some cough drops and sent us away." "Not this time." Marcus was already dialing. "This is Marcus Richardson. I need an ambulance at the alley behind Chen's Market on Pine Street. Tell them it's priority 1 and bill everything to my account. Yes, I'll authorize any and all medical expenses." While they waited for the paramedics, Marcus found himself studying the makeshift shelter the children had created. Cardboard walls held together with string and tape, a shopping cart filled with their possessions, a few changes of clothes, some canned food, a torn blanket, and several library books with worn covers. Despite the fights, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Poverty, everything was organized and clean. The boy had clearly been taking care of both of them with meticulous attention. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. Jake Morrison. And that's Emma, like I said." Jake shifted his sister's weight in his arms. "She likes stories. Before she got so sick, I used to read to her every night. She's really smart. Smarter than me, anyway." "Where are your parents, Jake?" The boy's jaw tightened. "Mom died 2 years ago. Cancer. Dad, he stuck around for a while after, but then he started drinking more and more. One day we came home from school, and all his stuff was gone. Left a note saying he couldn't handle it anymore." Marcus felt that familiar twist in his chest again. The casual way Jake recounted the abandonment, as if it was just another fact of life rather than a devastating betrayal. "How long have you been on the streets?" 14 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. Jake's precision suggested he'd been counting carefully. "We tried the system for a while. Foster homes and group facilities. But they kept trying to separate us, put Emma with a family and me somewhere else. I couldn't let that happen. She's already lost too much." The wail of sirens grew louder, echoing off the brick walls of the alley. Within minutes, paramedics were crouched beside Emma, checking her vitals and asking rapid-fire questions. Jake answered each one, with the detailed knowledge of someone who had become an expert caregiver by necessity. "Possible dehydration and malnutrition," one of the paramedics said to his partner. "Blood pressure's low, heart rate elevated. We need to get her to Children's Hospital." As they loaded Emma onto a stretcher, she stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Jake?" she whispered. "I'm right here, Em. These people are going to help you feel better." Jake took her hand as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. "Don't leave me," she said, her voice barely audible. "Never. I promise." Marcus followed them to the hospital, something compelling him to see this through. In the emergency room, he watched Jake navigate the admission process with the weary competence of someone far older than his years. The boy had memorized Emma's medical history, her allergies, even her social security number, carrying all the responsibility of a legal guardian despite being a child himself. Hours passed. Jake sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to Emma's bed, never once letting go of her hand. Marcus found himself in the chair beside him, having canceled his evening appointments without really thinking about why. "The doctor says she's going to be okay," Jake said when Emma finally fell into a natural sleep instead of the concerning unconsciousness from before. "Severe dehydration and some kind of intestinal infection. They've got her on antibiotics and IV fluids." "That's good news," Marcus replied. "Jake, I need to ask you something. Why did you trust me? You could have picked anyone on that street." Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching his sister's chest rise and fall with steady breaths. "You reminded me of someone. This guy who used to come to the shelter sometimes, before it closed. He never talked much, just served food and cleaned up. But he had the same look in his eyes that you do." "What look?" "Like you know what it feels like to lose everything, but you're trying real hard to pretend you don't." The words hit Marcus with unexpected force. He thought about his own childhood, the sister he'd failed to protect, the way he'd built walls around his heart so high that nothing could hurt him anymore. Or so he'd believed. "Jake, what would you say if I told you I wanted to help? Really help, not just with the medical bills?" Jake's eyes narrowed slightly, the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust easy promises. "Depends what kind of help you're talking about. A place to live. Both of you, together. Good schools for Emma, tutoring to catch up if needed. Whatever it takes to give you both a real chance." "And what do you want in return?" The directness of the question surprised Marcus. Most adults would have danced around the topic, but Jake had learned to cut through pleasantries to the heart of any transaction. "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted. "Maybe I just want to prove to myself that sometimes good things can happen, that sometimes the story doesn't have to end badly." Jake studied his face for a long time. "You lost someone too, didn't you? Someone you couldn't save." Marcus nodded slowly. "My sister. Her name was Rachel. She was 8 years old when they separated us in the foster system. I was 15, old enough to be placed in a group home, but not old enough to take care of her. I promised her I'd find a way to bring her home." His voice caught slightly. "She died in a car accident 3 months later. Her foster parents were drunk. If I had fought harder to keep us together, if I had found a way." "It wasn't your fault," Jake said quietly. "Maybe not, but I've spent the last 30 years building a fortune and a reputation, telling myself it was all so I'd never be powerless again, so I'd never have to watch someone I care about suffer because I couldn't do enough to help them." Marcus looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knew how long. "Maybe this is my chance to finally do something that matters." Over the following days, as Emma recovered in the hospital, Marcus learned more about the Morrison children's story. Jake had been caring for his sister with remarkable dedication, panhandling for money to buy her food while eating very little himself. He'd taught himself to read nutrition labels and had been trying to keep her healthy on a diet of whatever he could afford or find. Emma, despite her ordeal, was indeed as bright as Jake had claimed. She devoured books when she felt well enough to read, and her drawings of imaginary worlds covered in colorful creatures showed an artistic talent that took Marcus's breath away. When she smiled, which happened more frequently as her health improved, her whole face lit up with an infectious joy that made everyone around her feel lighter. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, Jake told Marcus one afternoon while Emma napped. She's always been good with animals. Before we lost the apartment, she used to feed stray cats in our neighborhood, made up names for all of them, and worried when they didn't show up for dinner. Marcus found himself spending more time at the hospital than at his office, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way Jake never complained about his situation, focusing entirely on Emma's needs. Or maybe it was Emma's resilience, the way she accepted Marcus's presence without question, as if adults suddenly appearing to help was a normal part of life. "Mr. Richardson," she said one evening while Jake was getting food from the cafeteria, "Jake says you're going to help us find a new place to live. Would you like that, Emma?" She nodded seriously. "As long as Jake can stay with me. He's the best big brother in the whole world. He knows how to make pancakes out of just flour and water, and he does all the voices when he reads me stories." "What's your favorite story?" "The one about the little prince who lived on an asteroid. Jake found it in the library's free box. The prince was all alone on his tiny planet, but then he went on adventures and met lots of people who taught him about love and friendship." She looked at Marcus with those same storm cloud eyes as her brother. "Do you think real life can be like that? Where lonely people find their way to each other?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'm starting to think it might be possible." When Jake returned with 3 cups of chocolate pudding from the vending machine, Emma was showing Marcus her latest drawing. It depicted a house with a red door, surrounded by a garden full of flowers and a tree with a tire swing. 2 figures that were clearly Jake and Emma stood in the yard, and beside them was a taller figure in a business suit. "That's our someday house," Emma explained. "Jake says if we keep hoping and being good to people, maybe someday we'll have a real home again." Marcus studied the drawing, noting the careful attention to detail. Emma had drawn curtains in the windows, a mailbox by the front walk, even a dog playing in the yard. It was the picture of a life she had never actually lived but somehow knew she wanted. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "how would you feel if that someday turned out to be sooner than you think?" 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the doorway of a 4-bedroom house in the Queen Anne neighborhood, watching Jake and Emma explore their new home with wonder. It wasn't a mansion, just a comfortable family house with hardwood floors, a modern kitchen, and a backyard big enough for the garden Emma had dreamed about. "The tire swing is already there," Emma squealed, running to the window that looked out over the yard. "And look, Jake, there's a reading nook by the fireplace, just like in the books." Jake moved more slowly through the rooms, touching surfaces as if to confirm they were real. "You really mean it? This is ours?" "It's yours," Marcus confirmed. "The deed is in a trust fund that will make sure you always have a place to live, no matter what happens. And there's money set aside for school, college, whatever you need." "But why?" Jake asked, the question that had been haunting him since Marcus first made the offer. "Why us? Why would you do all this for strangers?" Marcus sat down on the couch, gesturing for Jake to join him. Emma had found a closet full of art supplies and was already spreading colored pencils across the coffee table. "Do you remember what you said in the hospital? About me looking like someone who knew what it felt like to lose everything?" Jake nodded. "For 30 years, I've been successful by every measure that matters in my world. I built a company, accumulated wealth, gained respect. But I never let myself care about anything that couldn't be controlled or protected by money." Marcus watched Emma carefully select a green crayon for her latest masterpiece. "When I saw you taking care of your sister in that alley, willing to do anything to keep her safe, I remembered what it felt like to love someone more than yourself. I'd forgotten that feeling existed. And now? Now I remember that the most important things in life aren't things at all. They're connections. The choice to show up for someone when they need you most. Marcus smiled as Emma held up her drawing, a picture of the three of them standing in front of their new house. "You two saved me as much as I helped you. Maybe more." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Emma said something yesterday while you were signing all those papers. She said maybe angels look like regular people sometimes, so you don't know they're angels until after they've helped you." Smart girl. "Yeah, she is." Jake looked around the room, taking in the reality of their new life. "Mr. Richardson? Marcus? What happens now?" "Now you get to be kids. You go to school, make friends, worry about homework instead of where your next meal is coming from. Emma gets to take art classes and maybe even get that dog she keeps drawing in all her pictures. And you?" Marcus considered the question. "I get to learn how to be part of a family again, if you'll have me." Emma looked up from her drawing. "Does that mean you'll stay for dinner sometimes? Jake makes really good spaghetti, even if we didn't have sauce before." "I'd like that very much." Over the months that followed, Marcus discovered that his life had been fundamentally changed by two children he'd almost walked past on a busy Seattle street. He found himself leaving work earlier, prioritizing family dinners over business meetings. His penthouse apartment, once a symbol of his success, began to feel empty compared to the warmth of the Queen Anne house. Jake flourished in school, his intelligence finally given proper outlet and encouragement. He joined the debate team and discovered a talent for public speaking that his teacher said was remarkable for someone his age. Emma threw herself into art classes with the passion of someone making up for lost time, creating paintings that captured both the darkness of their past and the bright hope of their future. The three of them developed routines and traditions. Saturday morning pancakes with real syrup instead of the water and flour mixture Jake used to make. Sunday trips to the zoo, where Emma could indulge her love of animals. Evening story times where they took turns reading chapters from books that were now their own rather than borrowed from library-free boxes. Marcus also kept his promise about the dog. A golden retriever puppy named Sunny joined their family in the spring, completing Emma's vision of their perfect home. Jake taught the dog to fetch, while Emma appointed herself in charge of grooming and feeding schedules. "Look," Emma said one evening, showing Marcus her latest painting. It depicted the moment in the alley when he had first knelt beside them, but in her artistic interpretation, golden light surrounded all three figures. "This is the day our real life started." Marcus studied the painting, seeing not just Emma's artistic talent but her emotional wisdom. She had captured something essential about that moment, the way it had changed all of them in ways they were still discovering. "You know what I think?" Marcus said, hanging the painting in the place of honor above the fireplace. "I think some of the best things in life happen when we're brave enough to follow our hearts instead of our heads." "Is that what you did?" Jake asked. "When you came to find us?" "I almost didn't. I was so focused on my meeting, my business deal, my important life. But something about you made me remember that the most important things can't be scheduled or planned. They just happen when two people need each other and choose to take a chance." Emma climbed onto Marcus's lap, a gesture that had become natural over the months of their growing bond. "Jake says our mom used to tell us that families aren't just about blood. They're about who shows up when you need them most." "Your mom sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was, and she would have liked you. Jake and I decided that you're exactly the kind of person she would have wanted to take care of us if she couldn't." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes, the casual acceptance and love these children offered him still capable of catching him off guard. "I love you both very much. I hope you know that." "We love you too," Emma said simply. "And the best part is, we're never going to have to say goodbye, right?" "Right. We're family now. Forever." 2 years later, the adoption papers were finalized in a courthouse ceremony that felt both monumental and perfectly ordinary. Marcus, Jake, and Emma stood before a judge who smiled warmly as she declared them officially and legally a family. "Any words you'd like to share?" the judge asked. Emma raised her hand as if she were in school. "I just want to say that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the darkest places, like how flowers grow out of dirt, or how stars shine brightest when the sky is really, really dark." Jake nodded in agreement. "And sometimes the people who save you are the ones who need saving too. We all rescued each other." Marcus wrapped his arms around his children, his heart full in a way he had never imagined possible. And sometimes a stranger becomes family just because they were brave enough to follow a kid into an alley. The courtroom erupted in applause from the small gathering of friends and social workers who had supported their journey. But Marcus barely heard it. All his attention was focused on the two faces looking up at him with complete trust and infinite love. That evening, they celebrated with dinner at Emma's favorite restaurant, followed by a trip to the bookstore, where Jake could pick out new novels, and Emma could add to her growing collection of art books. It was an ordinary evening in their extraordinary life, the kind of simple happiness Marcus had once thought was reserved for other people. As they walked home under the Seattle streetlights, Emma's hand in his and Jake walking beside them with his new book already cracked open, Marcus thought about the man he used to be, the one who measured success in dollars and power, who protected himself by avoiding emotional connections, who had convinced himself that isolation was strength. That man would never have stopped for a homeless boy on a busy street. He would have walked past, focused on his important meeting and his valuable merger, missing the most valuable opportunity of his life. "Dad?" Emma said, using the title that still made Marcus's heart skip a beat every time he heard it. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that your brother was brave enough to ask for help, and that I was lucky enough to listen." "And I'm thinking," Jake added, "about how Mom always said that love multiplies instead of divides. The more you give away, the more you have." They walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, three people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of their separate lives. In Emma's latest painting, which hung prominently in Marcus's office at Richardson Industries, golden light surrounded a simple scene: a man in a business suit following two children down an alley toward an uncertain but hopeful future. Below it, in Emma's careful handwriting, were the words, "Sometimes angels wear regular clothes and carry briefcases. Sometimes miracles happen on ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Sometimes families are born in the most unexpected places." Marcus looked at that painting every day before leaving work to go home to his children. It reminded him that the most important choice he had ever made wasn't in a boardroom or a business deal. It was the choice to turn around to care, to follow his heart into an alley where two children were waiting for someone to choose love over fear. And every day, he was grateful beyond measure that he had been brave enough to say yes when love called his name. 5 years had passed since that transformative Tuesday afternoon in the alley behind Chen's Market, and the Richardson family had settled into the comfortable rhythms of ordinary life. Jake, now 18 and preparing for his senior year of high school, had grown tall and confident, his storm-cloud eyes still sharp but no longer carrying the weight of survival that had defined his childhood. Emma, 13 and bursting with artistic ambition, filled their home with canvases and sculptures that captured her unique perspective on a world that had taught her both cruelty and kindness in equal measure. Marcus had learned to navigate the delicate balance between being a father and being a friend, understanding when to guide and when to simply listen. His business continued to thrive, but it no longer consumed his every waking moment. The merger with the Yamamoto Group had indeed made Richardson Industries a shipping powerhouse, but Marcus found his greatest satisfaction in the smaller victories: Jake's acceptance letter to Stanford University, Emma's first art show at the local community center, family game nights that stretched past midnight with laughter echoing through their Queen Anne home. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. Jake had struggled initially with trusting that stability could be permanent, often checking and double-checking that the trust fund was still intact, that their home was truly secure. Emma had nightmares for months about being separated from Jake, requiring patient reassurance and sometimes sleeping on a mattress in Jake's room when the fears became overwhelming. Marcus himself had to learn how to be vulnerable, how to accept love without calculating its cost or anticipating its loss. But gradually, through therapy sessions and family meetings and countless ordinary moments of connection, they had built something none of them had believed possible: a genuine, unshakable sense of belonging. The call came on a rain-soaked Thursday evening in October. Marcus was helping Emma with her calculus homework, while Jake practiced his valedictorian speech in the living room when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something compelled him to answer. "Is this Marcus Richardson?" The voice belonged to a young Dayao, a woman, probably in her 20s, with a slight southern accent. "Yes, this is Marcus. How can I help you?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a social worker with King County Child Protective Services. I got your name from Jake Morrison. I hope I'm not calling it a bad time." Marcus felt his blood chill. "Is everything all right?" Has something happened to Jake or Emma? Oh no, sir, I'm sorry, I should have been clearer. Jake and Emma are fine. I'm calling because Jake gave me your contact information. You see, we have a situation here, and Jake thought you might be able to help. Marcus walked into the kitchen for privacy, his mind racing through possibilities. What kind of situation? We have 3 siblings in our care. Brothers, ages 16, 14, and 11. They were removed from their home 6 months ago due to parental neglect and substance abuse. The problem is, we can't find a foster family willing to take all 3 together. Every placement we've found wants to split them up, but the oldest boy, David, absolutely refuses to be separated from his younger brothers. Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, understanding immediately why Jake had given this woman his number. How did Jake become involved? David started a hunger strike 2 weeks ago. He's been hospitalized twice for dehydration, but he maintains that he'd rather die than be separated from Michael and Anthony. Jake somehow heard about the situation through the youth advocacy network he volunteers with. He came to visit David in the hospital and spent 3 hours talking to him. Marcus wasn't surprised. Jake had become passionate about helping other young people in the system, volunteering at shelters and mentoring programs whenever his school schedule allowed. It was his way of processing his own experiences while ensuring other children didn't face the same isolation he and Emma had endured. Jake told David about your family, Sarah continued, about how you took him and Emma in when no one else would. David asked if there was any chance you might consider helping them too. I know it's a huge ask, Mr. Richardson. 3 teenage boys is a significant commitment, and I understand if it's not something you can take on. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about the spare bedrooms in their house that had remained empty since they'd moved in. They'd talked about having more children, but Emma and Jake were thriving, and Marcus hadn't wanted to disrupt the delicate balance they'd achieved. Tell me more about the boys, he said. Sarah's relief was audible. David is 16, incredibly protective of his brothers. He's been essentially raising them since he was 12. He's behind in school, but tests show he's extremely intelligent. Michael is 14, quiet but artistic like your Emma. Anthony is 11, loves mathematics and building things. They've been through significant trauma, but they're good kids who just need stability and someone willing to keep them together. Where are they now? Temporary emergency placement at a group home. It's only supposed to be for 30 days maximum, but we're running out of options. If we can't find a family placement soon, the county will have no choice but to place them separately. Marcus looked through the kitchen doorway at his family. Emma was explaining something to Jake, gesturing animatedly with her pencil. Jake was listening intently, occasionally offering suggestions with the patient kindness that had always defined him. The scene was so peacefully domestic that it was hard to imagine adding 3 more children to the mix. But then he remembered another alley, another desperate boy asking for help, another moment when he'd almost said no and walked away. When can I meet them? Marcus asked. The Eastside Children's Home sat on a tree-lined street in Bellevue, a nondescript building that could have been an office complex if not for the playground equipment visible through chain-link fencing. Marcus parked his car and sat for a moment, trying to calm the nervousness that reminded him of the first time he'd brought Jake and Emma home. Sarah Chen met him at the front desk, a petite woman with kind eyes and the slightly frazzled appearance of someone juggling too many cases with insufficient resources. Thank you for coming, Mr. Richardson. I should warn you, David is still suspicious of adults making promises. He's been let down too many times to trust easily. They walked through corridors lined with cheerful but institutional artwork, past common areas where clusters of children played board games or watched television with the subdued energy of kids who had learned not to get too excited about temporary situations. The 3 Peterson brothers sat together in a small conference room, and Marcus felt a jolt of recognition at their body language. David, a tall boy with prematurely serious eyes, sat between his younger brothers like a human shield. Michael, pale and thin, clutched a sketchbook against his chest. Anthony, the youngest, leaned against David's shoulder while methodically taking apart and reassembling a small mechanical toy. "Boys," Sarah said gently, "this is Mr. Richardson, the gentleman Jake told you about." David's eyes assessed Marcus with the calculating wariness of someone far older than 16. "You're the rich guy who adopted Jake and Emma." "I'm the lucky guy who got to become Jake and Emma's dad," Marcus corrected, sitting down across from them. "Jake told me you've been taking care of your brothers for a long time. 4 years. David said curtly. Since our mom started using and Dad decided he had better things to do than raise kids. Marcus nodded, recognizing the anger that masked deeper pain. That's a heavy responsibility for someone your age. Maybe, but they're my brothers. Nobody's gonna take care of them better than I can. What if someone could take care of all three of you together? Marcus asked. What would that look like? For the first time, David's composure cracked slightly. Families don't want teenagers. They especially don't want three teenagers who come with problems and bad histories. Social workers always promise they'll keep us together, but when it comes down to it, there's always some excuse why it won't work. Michael spoke up for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. David hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a time since we got here. He's afraid they'll move us in the middle of the night. Anthony looked up from his toy. Are you really going to adopt us, or are you just looking? The directness of the question reminded Marcus powerfully of Jake, the same need to cut through adult evasions to get to the truth. I'm really considering it, but I need to know if it's something you'd want. And I need you to meet my other kids, see how everyone gets along. Other kids? David's suspicion flared again. How many kids do you have? Jake is 18, getting ready for college. Emma is 13. They both know I was coming here today, and they both want to meet you if you're interested. Michael opened his sketchbook and showed Marcus a detailed pencil drawing of 3 boys standing in front of a house, hands clasped together in a chain. I drew this last week. It's my wish picture. It's beautiful, Marcus said, studying the careful shading and emotional depth of the artwork. Emma would love to see this. She's an artist too. For the next hour, Marcus listened to the boys talk about their experiences, their fears, their hopes. David gradually relaxed his protective stance as he realized Marcus wasn't trying to separate them or make promises he couldn't keep. Michael showed more of his artwork, revealing a talent that reminded Marcus of Emma's early work. Anthony demonstrated how his toy worked, explaining the mechanics with the enthusiasm of a natural engineer. By the time the visit ended, Marcus knew with absolute certainty what his answer would be. That evening, he gathered Jake and Emma in the living room for a family meeting. He explained about the Peterson brothers, their situation, and the possibility of expanding their family once again. So basically, Emma said when he finished, there are 3 more kids out there who need what we have. A safe place to be together. That's one way to put it, Marcus agreed. But I want you both to understand what this would mean. 3 more people sharing our space, our attention, our resources. It would change everything about our daily life. Jake leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Do you remember what you told me in the hospital? About wanting to prove that sometimes the story doesn't have to end badly? Marcus nodded. Well, I think maybe this is another chapter in that same story. Emma and I got our happy ending because you were willing to take a chance on us. Maybe David and Michael and Anthony deserve the same chance. Emma jumped up and grabbed one of her paintings from the easel in the corner. It showed a tree with deep roots and many branches, each branch supporting a different bird in flight. I painted this last month for art class. The assignment was to illustrate the concept of family. I kept thinking about how families can grow and change and still be strong. Marcus studied the painting, seeing in it not just Emma's artistic vision, but her emotional wisdom. So you're both okay with this? With potentially having 3 new brothers. I'm excited about it, Emma said. I've always wondered what it would be like to be a big sister instead of the little sister. And I'm proud of you for considering it, Jake added. For not just settling for good enough when you could make things better for someone else. 2 weeks later, the Peterson brothers moved into the Queen Anne house on a crisp November Saturday. Marcus had spent the intervening time preparing bedrooms, enrolling them in school, and working with therapists to understand their specific needs and trauma responses. The adjustment wasn't immediate or easy. David remained hypervigilant for the first month, checking locks at night and maintaining emergency supplies in his backpack. Michael barely spoke above a whisper for weeks, communicating primarily through his art and written notes. Anthony threw himself into building elaborate structures out of household items, creating fortress-like arrangements in his room that clearly served as emotional barriers as much as architectural experiments. But gradually, with patience and consistency, the walls began to come down. David started sleeping through the night when he realized that Marcus checked on all the children before going to bed, a routine that provided the security David had been trying to create for himself. Michael began sharing his artwork at family dinners, encouraged by Emma's genuine interest and Jake's thoughtful questions. Anthony discovered that Marcus enjoyed learning about engineering principles and would sit for hours discussing the physics behind Anthony's increasingly complex creations. The breakthrough moment came during Thanksgiving dinner, their first major holiday as a family of 6. Emma had insisted on making place cards for everyone, decorating each one with personal touches that showed how well she'd come to know her new brothers. David's card featured a drawing of a protective shield, acknowledging his role as guardian. Michael's showed paintbrushes and pencils surrounding his name. Anthony's was decorated with gears and mathematical equations. As they went around the table sharing what they were grateful for, Anthony surprised everyone by speaking up first. "I'm thankful that David never gave up on keeping us together, even when it seemed impossible. And I'm thankful that Marcus believed Jake when he said we were worth keeping together too." Michael nodded, his voice still quiet but clear. "I'm thankful that Emma showed me how to paint feelings instead of just hiding them, and that Jake taught me that being scared doesn't mean you're weak." David was quiet for a long moment, then looked directly at Marcus. "I'm thankful that you didn't just help us. You listened to us. You let us be part of choosing our own future instead of just deciding what was best for us." Emma wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm thankful that our family keeps growing in the most beautiful ways, and that there's always room for more love." Jake raised his water glass. "I'm thankful for second chances, and third chances, and the kind of people who believe in them." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm thankful for a homeless boy who was brave enough to ask for help, for a little girl who taught me how to hope, and for 3 more children who reminded me that love multiplies when you share it." As winter melted into spring, the rhythms of their expanded household found their natural cadence. Jake balanced his college preparations with mentoring responsibilities, often bringing David along to youth advocacy meetings where David's experiences and insights proved invaluable. Emma and Michael collaborated on art projects that combined their different styles and perspectives, creating pieces that neither could have achieved alone. Anthony threw himself into advanced mathematics courses, finding in numbers and equations the logical order that had been missing from his early life. Marcus discovered that his capacity for love and worry had expanded exponentially. 6 children meant 6 different sets of concerns, dreams, and daily dramas. But it also meant 6 sources of joy, pride, and the kind of deep fulfillment he had never imagined possible. The adoption proceedings for the Peterson brothers were finalized on a sunny day in May, exactly 18 months after their first meeting. Judge Catherine Williams, who had overseen Jake and Emma's adoption years earlier, smiled as she looked down at the assembled family from her bench. "Mr. Richardson," she said, "when I signed your first adoption decree, I wondered if one man could truly provide the stability and love that 2 traumatized children needed. I'm pleased to say that not only have you exceeded every expectation, but you've chosen to extend that same commitment to 3 more children who desperately needed advocates." She turned to address all 6 children. "You've all been through challenges that no child should face. You've lost people you loved, experienced instability and fear, and had to grow up faster than any child should. But you've also learned something that many adults never discover: that families are built not just by blood or law, but by choice, commitment, and love." David stood up when invited to speak. At 17, he had grown into his height and carried himself with a confidence that came from security rather than defensive necessity. "Your Honor, I want to say that Marcus didn't just give us a home, he gave us back our childhood. For the first time in years, Michael and Anthony and I get to just be kids instead of survivors. We get to worry about homework and chores instead of where we'll sleep or what we'll eat. That's a gift we'll never take for granted." Michael, now comfortable speaking in group settings, added, "And he taught us that families can heal together, that you don't have to carry your pain alone." Anthony, ever practical, concluded, "Plus, he helped me build a really awesome robot for the science fair." It won second place. The courtroom erupted in laughter, and Marcus felt the familiar surge of pride and love that had become his constant companion. As they left the courthouse that day, officially and legally a family of 6, Emma linked arms with her brothers and declared, We need a new family picture for the mantle. The old one doesn't have enough people in it anymore. That evening, as they gathered for their traditional adoption celebration dinner, Marcus looked around the table at the faces that had become his world. Jake, now accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship and plans to study social work. Emma, thriving in high school and preparing her portfolio for art college applications. David, excelling academically and considering a future in law or social services. Michael, coming out of his shell and discovering a talent for both visual art and creative writing. Anthony, already taking college-level mathematics courses and dreaming of becoming an engineer. Each of them had brought their own gifts, their own challenges, their own capacity for resilience and growth. Together they had created something that transcended the sum of their individual parts. A family built on choice, strengthened by adversity, and defined by an unshakable commitment to showing up for each other. "Dad?" Emma said, using the title that still made his heart skip every time he heard it. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus smiled, remembering a similar question from years ago, in the early days when Emma was still testing whether this new life was real and permanent. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that I learned to listen when someone asks for help. And how amazing it is that every time we've opened our hearts a little wider, there's been more than enough room for everyone." Jake raised his glass of sparkling cider. "To families that choose each other. To second chances and fresh starts," David added. "To finding out that home isn't a place, it's the people who love you," Michael contributed. "To mathematical probability," Anthony said solemnly, "which says that the chances of all of us ending up together were basically impossible, but we did it anyway." Emma laughed. "To impossible things that happen when people are brave enough to believe in them." Marcus lifted his own glass, looking at each of his children in turn. "To the truth that love doesn't divide when you share it. It multiplies. And to the most beautiful family that was ever built, one brave choice at a time." As they clinked glasses and dissolved into the comfortable chaos of family dinner conversation, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. It had started with a homeless boy in an alley, continued with a decision to say yes when everything logical said no, and grown into something that exceeded his wildest dreams. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered in the evening light, full of other stories unfolding, other chances for connection and transformation. Somewhere out there, other children were waiting for someone to choose love over fear, hope over cynicism, possibility over probability. And Marcus knew with absolute certainty that their story was far from over. Love had a way of expanding to meet the needs of those brave enough to embrace it, and the Richardson family had learned that there was always room for one more heart around their table, one more dream in their house, one more chance to prove that families are built by choice and sustained by commitment. In Emma's latest painting, which hung in the place of honor above their fireplace, golden light surrounded a large house with many windows, each one showing a different scene of family life. Below it, in her careful handwriting, were the words, "Home is not where you come from, it's where you belong, and love makes room for everyone who needs it." It was a truth they lived every day, a promise they made to each other with every shared meal, every bedtime story, every ordinary moment that had become extraordinary simply because they had chosen to face it together. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.